There will be spoilers ahead for all 6 seasons of Silicon Valley. Today I'm going to talk about the ending of Silicon Valley Season 6 Episode 7 Exit Event, as well as 10 years later, the extended Pied Piper documentary. I definitely recommend watching the full doc if you haven't already. The YouTube link is in the description below. At Rustfest, Richard paired Middle out with Son of Anton 2.0, making PiperNet the most efficient network on Earth. However, Richard discovered that PiperNet started to compress the content of encrypted files in transit by bypassing encryption. They unintentionally made PiperNet so efficient that it was able to decrypt the strongest known encryption schemes, making PiperNet extremely dangerous as it would cause the end of encryption and possibly the end of the world. Richard and the gang had to sabotage their launch by using a faulty version of PiperNet. This defective version created interference that caused the speakers in the phones to resonate. The devices began broadcasting a frequency that started to repel the rats, making them flood the streets and buildings. Kind of like the idea Jared had back in Season 1 when he was trying to pivot, saying, "We're not here to tell you what to do with your rats, we're here to get you rats stat." The failed launch made Pied Piper become the definition of Pied Piper, as the Pied Piper was a rat catcher who would play a magical pipe to lure rats away from whatever town hired him. In the documentary, we see how everyone turned out 10 years after the failure of Pied Piper. Big Head is the president of Stanford, which is amazing if you know the fact that Josh Brenner, who plays Big Head, graduated from Harvard University in 2007. Russ bought a lot of Pied Piper shares from Big Head's dad before the launch, when Pied Piper had an $8 billion valuation. So it's safe to assume that Nelson and his dad made back the $20 million Ehrlich wasted. Monica mentions that the coin they issued to Ehrlich was sold for $20 million, meaning Ehrlich finally earned the 20 mil he threw away when he ran Bachmanity. Ehrlich taught Jin Yang how to become an egotistical, money-driven entrepreneur, the same way Jared trained Holden to be exactly like Jared. Finding Jin Yang in the jungle was most likely referencing John McAfee, the man known for creating the antivirus software, as he moved to Belize to build a large compound and started to become a warlord. When we see Jin Yang, he claims to be Ehrlich, and even has his ID, implying that he must have gotten a hold of whatever money was given to Ehrlich. The show's creator, Mike Judge, commented on how they came up with Jin Yang and Ehrlich's ending, saying, "We went around to a lot of different versions, including one we came very close to where it was pretty clear that Jin Yang had actually murdered him, but we backed off from that one and decided to leave it. It seems funnier that you don't know what actually happened to him. Lori is incarcerated for a reason that is not provided." Mike Judge further explained this, saying, "We had talked about having one person, we didn't know who when we first discussed it, in an orange jumpsuit being interviewed in prison, and we never say why, and we just settled on that being Lori." When seeing Lori in prison, I kept thinking of her ending line from Season 5 Episode 7 Initial Coin Offering, where Lori explains to Monica, "You have certain values, and I see no reason you should not work with companies that share them. Similarly, I should work with companies that share my values." It makes sense that the one main character operating with no ethical values besides Jin Yang is the one who gets put in an orange jumpsuit. Guilfoyle was the one person out of the group to trust Dinesh and allow him into the system to replace the build with the one that is set up to fail, showing us just how solid their friendship actually is. It's revealed that Guilfoyle and Dinesh run a cybersecurity company, a company named Newell Road Strategic Technologies, in memory of Ehrlich's incubator that was at the address of 5230 Newell Road, Palo Alto, California. Earlier in the series, when Guilfoyle talks about Anton, he describes it saying he grimly does his work. Then he sits motionless till it's time to work again. We could all take a page from his book. And throughout all of Season 6, we see that John is the human version of Anton. So in the end, Guilfoyle is working with his two best friends. And by the way, I love the small details in their office. As Dinesh talks about not doing it for fame, there's a framed picture of him with the people in line for the Pied Piper launch, proving that he is the same ego-driven tech leader we all know and love. Guilfoyle's phone is moved a little bit onto Dinesh's desk to slightly annoy him, and there's also an orange thumb drive plugged into Guilfoyle's computer. This is interesting, because this episode ends with Richard losing an orange thumb drive with the last remaining Pied Piper code on it. Some people were saying that this was the wrong thumb drive because it should have a silver part on it, referring to the one we see earlier in Exit Event, but that was Gabe's thumb drive. And that drive only had the version of software that was used to destroy Pied Piper. The original build was still at their headquarters, so in my opinion, it could be Richard's thumb drive. But knowing Guilfoyle, he wouldn't keep something that destructive in plain sight. Also, executive producer of Silicon Valley, Alec Berg, claimed that the thumb drive doesn't actually appear in the episode. It was just mentioned to further emphasize the fact that Richard lost something that will end the world. And quick side note, Alec Berg didn't just direct exit event, he also played the documentarian. Bill Gates, who is a fan of the show, makes an appearance as one of the tech leaders getting interviewed. And out of all of the people, he was the one who was most suspicious of Pied Piper's failure, saying that something doesn't add up. Pied Piper's actual build would have been destroyed after the demo. Before the destruction, Dinesh and Guilfoyle must have kept it and used parts of the code to build their cybersecurity company, and Monica could have stolen it and used it to build her career in DC. As she claims that she's working for a think tank, and when they ask if it's the NSA, she goes to smoke a cigarette as she always does when she's under pressure, confirming that she now works for the NSA, which makes sense because Monica mentions that she was in contact with them at the end of season 5 episode 8, 51%, saying to deal with things like the NSA. They called yesterday. They have a lot of questions about our tech. So when Richard is the one who loses a world-ending piece of technology that anyone can get their hands on, it's probably a good thing that the people who are most familiar with the threat are working in cybersecurity. A lot of people seem to be questioning Gwart's existence, like why was Gwart in the season? She literally didn't do anything. But I think she served a big role in Jared and Richard's relationship. Jared is the human version of a dog. He's incredibly loyal and guards the people he cares about, hence the random rage in the you scene and the iconic how would you like to die today scene. He was like a dog barking to protect its owner. Jared was state-raised and always felt helpless as he was put through the system with a lot of rough kids. He saw Richard as someone who was weak and needed to be protected, which was one of the reasons he left Hooli to join Pied Piper, deciding to work against the bullies of the tech world like Gavin Belson. Eventually, Richard no longer needed protection, as Pied Piper became a powerhouse like Hooli to the point where they actually bought Hooli. So Jared felt like he had to find someone else who needed protection. In season 6 episode 2, when Richard is making fun of Gwart, Richard is being a hypocrite, because this entire series he was saying that the tech world was for the nerds and the rejects, but here he was making fun of one. At this moment, Richard became Gavin, so Jared freaked out, once again defending the weak from the powerful. Gwart helped us better understand that Jared will protect weaker people because he wasn't strong enough as a kid to protect himself. Now Jared is protecting the weakest people on Earth, the elderly, something that also gives him the opportunity to feel like he has multiple parents, to make up for his awful and heartless biological parents. Throughout every season, Richard's morals and beliefs were put to the test. In the heartless, greedy land of Silicon Valley, Richard wanted to achieve his goals in the most ethical way. In season 2, he admitted to using a Hooli computer to work on his Pied Piper algorithm even though it would cause him to lose the trial. In season 3, he turned down Coleman Blair's offer when he claimed the uptick was caused by buying fake users from a Bangladeshi click farm. In season 4, he couldn't handle the pressures that come with being a CEO, but understood that he was becoming like Gavin, and admitted to not running the company with integrity. However, in seasons 5 and 6, Richard continued to become more and more like Gavin, and everything he hated about him. He even became more like Ehrlich as he was sleeping with other people's wives and took advantage of Big Head, jeopardizing Big Head's career and income. Richard's morals and beliefs were always challenged when trying to make a successful business. He started out by turning down 10 million to eventually turning down $1 billion. To the best of his ability, Richard stood by his principles. He ended up not becoming a giant tech leader like Gavin Belson, but it was his persistence that made Gavin invent Tethix, even if Gavin initially created it for the wrong reasons. Richard's fight for Pied Piper forced Gavin out of the tech industry, giving Gavin time to become passionate about writing, and he now values the arts over his image, something that is shown to us by him cutting the interview short as he is too excited about getting back to work. With Gavin having no motive to be the kind of man we knew for the past 6 seasons, it makes sense that he and Richard are now best friends. Plus, Gavin's a really good author. The elderly woman Jared was taking care of was even reading one of his books. Richard had the idea to create a decentralized internet, one of the most ethical pieces of technology that would exist. Pied Piper accomplished what it was designed to do, but it ended up becoming potentially more destructive than anything they could have ever imagined. By sacrificing the company, ruining their product, and throwing away 6 years of hard work, Richard ended up making the world a better place. So I couldn't think of a better person to be teaching ethics and technology at a university. Pied Piper was forgotten. The girl who now lives in the house is wanting to work in tech but has never even heard of Pied Piper. In Silicon Valley, companies and people come and go so quickly. The girl's lack of knowledge was meant to emphasize that power and fame are always fleeting. At the end of the day, what matters mattered was if the group could live with themselves. In a place where everyone's success is determined by status and net worth, Richard doesn't make billions and no one remembers him, but he still finds fulfillment. And that's all I have to say about Silicon Valley. In my personal and completely biased opinion, this is one of the greatest comedies ever made, and I will greatly miss it. Always Blue. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next Ending Explained.